preparing to go live. Looking good. If this works, it'll be much easier to set things up in the future this way.
Oh, is there just like a whole new thing?
Yep. There we are, yeah. Oh, there we go. Now, let me see if it is, yeah. You've just said that. Hang on. Hang on. Oh, yeah. They. Hang on. Stop. Right. Now.
Technical difficulties, everyone.
Absolutely. It's new stuff. So it's now, I basically. Why is it speaking? I don't want it to speak. Right. I'm going to get shut of that there. That's fine. Okay. That's the first thing that's done. So we're now there. Okay. Kristie, old chap, just bear with me a moment or two. I'm old, you see, and I find it very difficult to do these things sometimes. All right. But I'm not overly concerned about it, you know, because if I get this going, we can then see people's rude comments and things like that. There we are. So that's looking good. If I click that on there. Kristie, old chap.
That's all we need, is to hear more of us talking.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It does my ego the world of good, you know. Here we are. Yeah. My word, there's somebody called, oh, it's one of our brothers in Brighton, Sean Mooland.
Oh, Shane. No. Oh, no.
Oh, there she is. Anyway, back up. I never know whether she's teasing me or being serious. It's very difficult to tell when people have got all these sides to them. Anyway, Kristie, lovely to meet you. Right, we've never met before. We've never talked directly with each other before, but we've shared sort of banter back and forward. Have we not? Right. And I think that you're probably one of my soulmates from eons of time ago, you know, because that seems to be the way it works, isn't it? You just have resonance with people and you can't really understand why. You just have this deep sort of sense that we've met before in some way. I think actually you were probably an abusive husband of mine in a past life somewhere along the line. That's my feeling. And I've been reincarnated to basically to pay you back. What do you think about that?
Here, I thought we were going to be serving you penance for your revolting women status yesterday. Tables have turned. Right.
Well, I have these thoughts that come to me, and I thought, yeah, all women in the world are revolting. I think I'll put that in and see what the sort of reaction is, not response as such, but most people, they know me by now, you know, and they know that I'm a pot stirrer, you know, but I do it for lightheartedness, and I don't mean to be offensive in any way, shape or form. Some people did take the bait, which I was pleased about, but, you know, I have to try and sort of moderate that and sort of mollify it and smooth it out a bit, you know, because it's really meant for fun, because I think that the world seems to be so miserable at the moment, you know, and my view is that I spent many years in misery, and, you know, it brought me to the point of trying to do myself in quite seriously. And I shouldn't be here now, you know, we're not going into all the details, because this is basically all about you, this show, which you'll enjoy, I'm sure. But, you know, it brought me to the point of I can't carry on anymore. I've had enough. I don't know what to do. Just take me away, you know. And it was almost as if I was turned around, kicked up the arse, right, and told, get on with it now. It's all about lightheartedness, because that's the key to life, is be lighthearted, dig deep in your heart, find out what your soul's purpose is, and use your innate skills and abilities, right, to bring some love and some light to the world. And that's what I think I'm here for. Am I like that all the time? No, I'm not. No, you know, because sometimes when I get tired, the old Joe comes back and I remember what it used to be like, you know. But fortunately, I've got a sort of I've got some equipment now whereby I can change me gestalt quite quickly and get back on with it, you know. So what do you think about that?
You know, all my life I used humor before as sort of a crutch and a deflection. I'm sure you can know about that. You know, when things got so heavy and dark, I would make light of it, but in a way that was, you know, as a way to not face what was happening, you know, and I would, you know, poke fun at people in a way that was mean, though, not in like a fun, cheeky way. It was in like a nasty sort of way, because that's how I treated myself, right? As soon as I saw an opening, I would go for it, you know, and I'm quite quick, and you know, you are too. And so I when I would do it, it would be almost like I was riding this wave of like, it was totally ego, just being like, ha ha ha, like I'm so funny and quick. And now that I've kind of taken that shadow aspect, I've turned it into this sort of, yeah, like what you said, lightness, like I want to add humor and lightness to what's going on right now, just because, you know, it is so dark, of course. And also just, it's from the like very fundamental level. I don't know if you know gene keys. I'm sure you do. I pay attention to these things as like, oh, that's nice, but I don't like harness onto it as like, this is the only thing, you know.
Yeah.
But one of my gene keys is lightness. Like that was like one of my major purpose ones was lightness. And I just found that to be so confirming. You know, it's almost like, aha, yes, it's written in the DNA that, you know, I'm here for lightness as well. I find humor and tragedy to be so fine line. Like they're just, sometimes I have to throw up my hands and just say, this is so fucked, you know, and laugh, because it is sometimes, you know, when you go so low.
No, I agree entirely. And where I'm up to is, I went through what's called the 12-step recovery program in Alcoholics Anonymous. Actually, I'm choosing to tell people that, you know, but I'm not a representative for AA, you know, but I learned a lot of stuff in AA, and that was 30 years ago. And every day I followed the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous as best as I can, you know. And what they basically are is the first 9 steps of AA is about clearing the wreckage of the past. And I had to go through quite a disciplined sort of system, if you like, where I made a list of all persons I've harmed or could remember that I'd harmed. And if I possibly could, without causing even more offense, is go and approach them directly and apologize to them, you know. And that was hard. And I think that's the step in sort of massive ego deflation, because I didn't want to, right? I was sorry for everything I did. And once I started to see my part in it, I realized that, you know, how wrong I'd been and stuff like that. But it was my emotional reaction to what they were doing that caused me to harm them. Right. And I was shown is, how did you put yourself in that situation in the beginning, Joe? Did not you yourself set the ball rolling? So what you've basically got to do is you got to go back to these people. You've got to apologize, and you've got to say to them, if there's anything at all I can do to neutralize this or pay you back or whatever, I'm quite willing to do so. And most people said, Joe, we knew you weren't well. You were a lovely, lovely man. Right, but with drink down you turned into the devil, you know. And like you said, Kristie, I would use my mouth to cut people down, and I could do it from 3 miles away. And I was ferocious and vicious with my mouth, because I was able to pick out their deformities, if you like. Right, you know, which were the deformities in me, and I didn't understand that at the time, but I could see their deformities clearly, and I would pick out on them and use it against them, you know, and call that narcissism. It's secondary narcissism, actually. Right, I was narcissistic to the nth degree, you know. And I know that, you know, and I could remember stuff as well, because had you told me something 5 years ago, I just remember that, just in case I need to bring that back, just to put you down again, you see, you know. And so I know that. And you mentioned working on shadow aspects and stuff. I've done a lot of shadow work over those. Is it all gone? No, I don't think it's all gone. You know, I think that the ego itself is necessary. And I think a normal, balanced ego is the way forward. It's ego attachments that were the problem, you know. And I think I didn't know I was going to go on in this lecturing mode here, but you know, it was almost as if, right, this great big shift that's coming in now is causing everybody on the planet to go through a past life review. You know, I think everybody now is being faced, right, with all the stuff that they've repressed and suppressed, but in a sort of witnessing way. And there's a lot of people who don't understand spiritual pathways and stuff like that. they're really feeling it now because they don't know what to do with all this stuff that's emerging, you know. And I can sort of see my job, because I've gone through it, and maybe yours as well, is because maybe we're a little bit further along, right, still with loads to learn, you know, that we can see the pitfalls that people may be going to fall into and just share our experience with them, you know. So that's where I'm up to. I mean, I go off track a lot, but, you know, I think more than anything else is, in myself, I feel most of the time cool, calm, collected, even in the most horrendous of situations. I think that I've been reincarnated in this shit for the very purpose of staying in this shit and helping people to get out of it, you know. So my past is murky, it's dirty, it's ferocious, it's vicious, and all those things, you know. And I understand the energies that go on in those places, you know. So for some reason, my soul chose to be there just to sort of help out, I think. But like I say to people, is I could be totally and utterly wrong. And if I am, then if I've hurt anybody or offended anybody, I'll say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, you know. Christ, there we go. You're like a sort of sister confessor almost.
There it is. I pull it out of people.
Yeah.
My God, it's like talking to a mirror. Woo. You know, I didn't go through the, like, technically AA, but I kind of put myself through it just at a distance. I went to one, you know, many years ago when my family staged an intervention when I was, you know, drinking bourbon alone in my room. My brother, who was my roommate at the time, walked in, and I was just like obviously worried to all hell. And, you know, my family came together. They didn't have tools. This is way back in the day, early, like maybe 2011. And, you know, they didn't have tools. So I just said, yeah, I'm not going to do it anymore. You caught me, you know, hands up. But what really happened is I got better at hiding it. You know, wine in coffee mugs, like tumblers that were tall, just able to like hide it, chewing a lot of gum, you know, just like, you know, trying to, and the thing is that no one really ever knew how drunk I was because I was so able to compose myself. I tricked so many people. I deceived myself, of course, most of all, but I was so able to be so deceptive and sneaky and living in those like shadowy, shame-filled places. And that's just where I lived. Like I was drunk every day and wasted every day. It wasn't just drunk. I was like very blacked out. And, you know, it's the same for me. Last year was when I actually first started, at the actually beginning of the year, I started making amends. You know, I reached out to all of those men. It's men that I had hurt mostly. There was a few women in there too, but there was about 15 people that I reached out to and said, you know, if it was appropriate to reach out, that it wouldn't cause more harm. I said, look, I was absolute mess back then. You know, I owned everything. I sent out as many messages as I could of apology, and every single person wrote back the same. They were just like, yeah, I get it. I see you. I'm actually going through something myself. You know, it was just alarming, really, making amends. You know, sometimes in your head, you can think like, oh no, I'm going to get in so much shit for this, but it was just liberating. Like honesty, as soon as I started being honest for the first time in my mouth, in my life, also my mouth, the first time honesty started coming out of my mouth, it's like I couldn't stop. And now I can't stop being honest. It's not like, it's even if I tell a slight white lie, if something just slips out like, oh, I'm unavailable for this reason, I'll retract and be like, actually, it's because of this. You know, even if someone says, how are you feeling? And I'm like, good. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm actually not feeling good. It's just that automatic reaction of like, you know, conversation. So even those lies I can't do anymore. I have to be honest. And it's so freeing to exactly what you said. It's like a murky, vicious past. I can't believe how much I've been through, you know, and it's unbelievable that we are able to still have that lightness, you know, and the more that I go into that dark place, the abyss, I like to call it, the more lightness gets excavated. It just happens. And it's just pure alchemy. My heart is just like expanding right now, feeling that.
Yeah. Perfect. I couldn't agree more. To me, it's about letting go, allowing, you know, to us to sink as deep as possible And in the depth, as we plunge the depth by letting go. So there's no action other than letting go that's demanded on our behalf. You know, there's no energy required, because as we let go, we sink deeper. And it's almost as you sink deeper, as I sink deeper, my mind expands more and I can understand more, really. So it's sinking deeper to get higher, really. You know, that's the way I sort of explain it. And from one day to the next, the thing that I've learned is that I just accept the day as it is and try and make the best of it. That's the simplicity of my life now. And I try not to look any further than the end of my nose, because I'm saying to people is just act right on what emerges. Just take the next step and don't look further than the next step. And that's what it's become to me, being and becoming. And the becoming is taking the next step and not having any expectations on where it's going to lead us, you know, because I know that having expectations, expectare means to, I'm doing the lecture thing now, expectare means to look outwards. So that's the outlook, right? But I think that we need to expect less and inspect more. And I think that's what happened to me. As soon as I started to look within to see how I was processing information that was leading either to positive emotion or negative emotion, right, it started to make sense to me, you know. So that's the whole thing. And I've learned a lot about what I'm writing a book. It's called the F-off approach to health and happiness, you know, and F-off stands for focus on feelings first. Because feelings are the manifestation or the emergence of underlying emotional you know, collisions, if you like. When we're emotionally disturbed, it's because our instincts are in collision with one another. You know, you'll know this from TFT and EFT and NLP and all those sorts of things, right? But most people have got no idea that there's all this stuff going on within the other than conscious mind that we're not aware of, that's actually emerging as feelings. And if we don't know that our feelings drive our thinking, drive our actions, that it's very difficult to change, you know. So I help people now, only with what I've learned myself, in understanding how to find out how their internal operating systems work, and to know themselves deeper and deeper and deeper. And then when they can do that then and become much more body aware, they can feel the emotions start to emerge at an earlier stage before they take on any ferociousness, and they can nip it in the bud before it goes any further. So that's where I'm up to, really. I don't know what people need to do. I point them back to find out themselves by looking inwards, you know, and a sort of, you know, that's where I'm up to with stuff at the moment, you know. What do you think that your purpose in life is then? I mean, have you got a purpose, or do you develop your own purpose, or what, you know, because I don't know the answer to this. I've got my own version, but what do you think, feel?
Well, it's honestly everything that you kind of just said is my purpose, is, you know, restoring that personal relationship to the true self, the self that's kind of buried underneath everything. That, because, you know, for my whole life, I thought I was Kristie and I'm operating as this person, and, you know, but I had no idea I was the witness to all of that. You know, I had no idea that all those spiraling, churning thoughts where I couldn't sleep and that anxiety was actually just all of these emotions that I hadn't felt yet, you know. And once I was actually able to feel those and get those out of my body, Joe, I'm able to sleep now. I can sleep through the night deeply. I don't need earplugs. I don't need blackout curtains. I don't need any of that stuff, because the turbulence is settled. And, you know, I used to try, before I had done the emotional work, I tried, you know, meditating, watching my thoughts, but the thoughts just were like a highway, a freeway, just keep going. And I didn't realize, like, oh, they're being fed by the fact that I have this like ocean of just like waiting to like roar out of me. And, you know, once that comes out in enough like chunks, there's quiet, there's peace. And I what I really feel is that I'm here to, I guess, because I've like dipped my hand in every pot you could possibly imagine of traumatic experiences, I feel like I have a lot to offer in terms of like, not as like a guru or like, I'm always a student. I just as more like a, hey, like a tour guide, like pointing out the sites, like, oh, don't go that way, that's going to be weird, like try that out, but also try it for you. I don't know what's best for you. You know what's best for me. All I can do is point out road signs and sort of just say like, you know, this is a dangerous slope, you know, etc. So yeah.
No, same really. I just point people back to certain principles. You know, I try not to give any advice, although I do. I feel myself doing it, you know, but you know, I try and give advice based upon what I've been through, and say to people, this may or may not work for you. This is what I did and this is what happened. Because I think that's about the honest way of sharing an experience, really, without elaborating, which I find difficult, you know, because I like to tell stories and I like to be on the stage as well. You know, I like all that stuff, you know. I describe myself as a scientist, a shaman or shaman, and a showman as well, you know, because I love all that stuff, you know, and the one-liners and things like that, like you do, you know. But the thing about it is, I just try, like you said, is put people back to reconnecting with their essential selves, you know. And Carl Rogers, this was basically the fundamental principles of his humanistic psychology, if you like, was all about the unconditioned self, you know, the original face that wasn't sort of cluttered in with the personality aspects. And there's lots of people now talking about letting go of the personality self. And I understand what they mean by it, because persona, I always do this. I get into teacher mode. I can't help myself, you know. But persona means mask, you know, and it's very, very symbolic about what's going on out there as well, is because I think that the solution to the problem will be to unmask ourselves totally and be left with our original faces, you know. So that's where I'm up to. And yeah, you'll go. I've forgotten what I was going to say, so I'm passing it back to you now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you know all about like inner family systems and parts work and, you know, Gestalt and all that stuff. That helped me so much to realize that there are a bunch of like different aspects of my psyche, if you like, that were trapped in certain stages of my development where there was developmental trauma. You know, there's a certain child self that has all these feelings. There's a certain, you know, magician self that it's like, oh, someone's going to rescue me. And it's, once I started actually talking to those parts, I actually started writing it down. I said, okay, when I'm in this mode, this is who's talking to me. Say it's like, maybe it's my inner feminine, which is like, oh, men need to save me. Say that was like what she thought. I would write that down. Okay, so when I'm in that mode, those are the thoughts and those are the feelings that are coming up. True Kristie doesn't feel that way. True Kristie, the one that is buried under the belief that, you know, a man needs to save me, that person, like, I don't feel that when I'm in my true self. Like when I'm like centered and I feel confident and compassionate and clear, like that clarity, all the other voices are just parts of my personality. And, you know, there's traumatized parts, there's parts that are just trying to protect me, you know, but they all have their thing to say. And realizing that I'm not those things, you know, is again, liberating. It's realizing like, oh, wow, there are a bunch of different pieces of me that all belong to the same whole. And it's just about bringing them all back together. You know, they're like ships lost at sea, and, you know, centered me is the lighthouse, kind of bringing them all back. And they're out there and there's some choppy waters, but they're, you know, and it isn't about abandoning or pushing away those parts. Like I have nasty parts of me and I bring them all back and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I can be a real bitch sometimes, you know, and I just love those parts of me, or whatever it is, the shadow aspect, you know. And it's realizing like every time I look at someone else and I'm judging them, that, oh yeah, in those circumstances, I would be like that too. You know, anytime I'm judging someone, I'm like, I have no idea what their backstory is. Yeah. If I find myself in judgment, it doesn't, like, it happens, of course it slips in, but I'm quite wary of it now. I used to be just the most judgmental person. I swear, I didn't know anyone more judgmental than me. I was nasty. And, you know, being able to look at that and be like, oh, all of those things are within me too. You know, I can be conceited. I can be, you know, whatever the judgment is, I can be those things. And then you just kind of have to look and be like, oh, you lovable humans, like I'm just like you know, and there really is no difference once you're able to see it in that way.
No, I agree. And I think the more our hearts open when we understand that, it's almost like there's a tractor beam, you know, like an attractor beam that starts to draw all those fragments together. And I think that's what's actually happening now. We're being powered up by this great shift in consciousness that's getting closer, right? And so we're being activated and we're being basically forced, I'm going to say forced, we're being forced to take a witnessing stance and become more objective about our subjectivity. And people have explained it to me that you can put all these characters and characteristics on the stage and watch them performing, you know, as though they weren't part of you. And that's a way to sort of develop some distance between the I am self, if you like, the original face, right, and the personality self, which is Joseph Peter Aloysius Delaney in this go round, you know. And a sort of, some days I'm right in Joe, and some days I'm completely detached with love from him, you know, just watching him, you know. Even today driving, I was looking at my hands thinking, whose are those hands, right? You know, and I was doing the gear shift and stuff like that, thinking he's good at this, you know. So I'm sort of like a sort of backseat driver, the I am presence. So I was in there observing Joe actually driving and stuff like that, you know. And whether that's an out of body experience or some sort of astral, I don't really understand. I haven't got deep enough to try and work all that out now. I just sort of go with it, really, you know. And most of the time, to be honest with you, I'm relatively centered, cool, calm, collected, and I feel great, you know. I look back at the traumas. I mean, we talk about PTSD. I work with a lot of people who've got PTSD, but also CPTSD as well, which I know that you've talked about, you know, and one of them's more an acute phase response, you know, that's the PTSD bit where it's normally just one sort of situation that fires people deep into hiding. You know, that's the way I look at it. But CPTSD, so C to me means chronic, you know, and it's built up over a series of events over time, you know. And I think everybody on the planet to some degree, you know, has got this CPTSD, you know. And I think as we're being forced to sort of go, and I think the I am self, the spirit, our soul, will guide us back to the one that needs working on next. I think if we get into our psychology and try and plan it out for ourselves, right, oh, I think I'll go back to 1955 when I was born and look at that first. I think that, so what I do is, and call it a prayer if you like, I say to my heart, soul, I say, look, whatever, you know, guide me where I need to go and show me what I need to see and give me the courage to be able to handle it, please. So go on then, off you go. Because I only want to live in the truth now. You know, whatever that means, Kristie, you know, I don't know, but I know that the truth will set you free, but sometimes it hurts like hell when you sort of, and I don't think anybody can get away with the feelings either. I think that's the important thing, you know. So I probably, like you, I teach mindfulness and mindful breathing, because I think that's a way to stay open and allow this transformation of all this suppressed energy to come out without latching onto it, but almost like to dissipate, and to add the energy back to our systems to give us more enthusiasm and vitality, really.
When I was learning to breathe, I know that might sound strange, but man, when you have, you know, been living out of your chest breathing for your whole life, learning to breathe is, woo, I'm still learning, you know. I still have my days when I'm like, oh, have to breathe. Like just, you know, earlier today, I was like, oh, I'm so excited. And I found myself in my chest and I was like, okay, I just got to go down into my body. So when I was first learning to breathe, I really loved this book, The Presence Process by Michael Brown. He teaches you how to do consciously connected breathing. That's what he calls it. I shortened it to presence breath. It just feels better rolling off the tongue for me, but you just connect your breath sort of like, and it's sort of like a breath work. And you do that for 15 minutes and oh my God, so much stuff comes up. You start to feel this like tension coming up and like tingles in your shoulders. And it's almost just like, it's almost like electrocuting a pond and all the fish come up to the surface. I know it's a terrible visual, but it's like that. And like, you know, they're all like there and you then you can feel these things. And oh my gosh, it's such an amazing experience learning to breathe. It really does connect you back to that present moment, you know, and realizing like, okay, when I'm breathing, right now is what matters. You know, when I find myself out of my belly breath into my, you know, chest in that tightened way, not like a heart breathe, like a tightened, like, ooh way, then I'm like, I'm in the past, I'm in the future, I'm trying to figure something out down the road, I'm trying to make a plan, you know, but when I'm actually able to like, come back to that belly breath, the now is really like the only thing that I can focus on. but it takes so much practice, especially when you're not used to it. If you have so much trauma going on, it's been such a journey, you know, many, many years of this for me, definitely with the PTSD. It's just been, like every day. I'm like you, I kind of take it one day at a time. I try not to get ahead of myself and just stay now, you know, as much as I can.
I think the way that we talk to ourselves is important as well, you know, because I was so super critical of myself. Because I was always, my thing was, you're a dickhead, Joe. You're just a dickhead, you know. And I realize now that that was from an early age, because my mum, God love her, you know, she was very critical as well, and she could be very hurtful with words and stuff like that, you know. And I see now, looking back, because I've had some space to look back at it in a more balanced way, you know, almost like a transactional analysis, adult sort of a way, you know. Yeah. I can look back at it now and see that it was based in good intentions to start with, you know, because she didn't want to see me get hurt. She didn't want to see me be made a fool of and stuff like that, you know. So she was very critical to try and keep me on the path that she thought was best for me, you know. And I mentioned to you in a little tweet or whatever about a thing called the mummy's curse, you know. And I've based a talk on the mummy's curse, and it was really about the inverted mother, you know, the critical mother. Right. And the one who basically, you know, because I say mother doesn't always know best, you know, because I basically followed every single suggestion that my mother made to me, because I didn't know anything other than that, you know. And I can see looking back, I told my mum said to me when I was a kid, you know, she said to me, what do you want to be when you grow up, son? I said, I want to be a doctor. And she went, ooh, she said, you don't want to do that. They're far too clever. So there was the first one. They're far too posh, right? They live in big houses and we don't, and all, you know, so immediately I sort of took on board her fears and her concerns, you know, based again on probably in good intentions. But, you know, I had this thing that's what I really want to be, you know, and it sort of squashed me dreams, you know. Dreamer, I noticed you put Supertramp up. Supertramp, one of my favorite groups in the 70s. Crisis, what crisis, right?
Love
and there's
them.
a song called Sister Moonshine, right? And it was my life, basically, you know, where, oh, see, I've got a great big thing going up my spine here now talking about this. But, you know, there's also, coincidentally, there's a track on there called Easy Does It, which is one of the AA principles, you know, easy does it, one step at a time, give time, you know, very, very simple, little short, sharp things, you know, which are very, very sensible. Anyway, I digress. To go back to my mum. Yeah, I basically ran through, and 10 years before Anita Roddick had the idea of the body shop. I don't know whether you have the body shop in Canada and stuff like that, but, you know, yeah. So 10 years before that, I said to my mum, hey, mum, you know, if they had all these natural things for selling people and not full of all these chemicals, that'd be, oh, she said, you don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Another one was, again, about 10 years, is what if we put little detectors on bumpers so that when they got close to things, it beeped? Oh, you don't want to be talking like that, you know. So I sort of have a mind that's in the future and seems to bring ideas in. And these days, I'm allowing it to come through now, and I'm taking action on it one step at a time, you know. So I don't know whether that means whether you can resonate with any of that stuff I've just said there, really.
Oh my God, can I ever? Yeah, you know, my mom had me when she was really young, 19, and she, you know, had her own traumas and everything to deal with, of course, too, that I didn't, you know, obviously know about until I'm like you, able to look back now. But same thing, everything that came out of her mouth was criticism towards me. Same with my dad, actually. I never could do right in his eyes. I tried so hard, but it was never enough, you know, just striving. So yeah, I ended up doing two things. I became an overachiever and a complete underachiever, where I would do really well and then I'd drink myself out of a job, or, you know, I would constantly flip back and forth between superhuman, subhuman, superhuman, you know, just because there was this constant narrative that I internalized, you know, that inner critic became internalized from those caregivers' voices. You know, I was told my whole life growing up, you're going to have low self-esteem just like me. You're going to have low self-esteem just like me. And that was embedded in my head, you know, and I was essentially used as an emotional spouse for her growing up, you know, with her men troubles and all that stuff. And, you know, what that does to a kid, you know, I didn't have a childhood, really. I was put in all these activities and stuff to kind of keep me busy, but I was also caretaking 3 younger siblings. And I was, you know, being a crutch for the adults in my life when I was 10, 9. And, you know, it's, yes, soul stuff and all that, like purpose, but it's not appropriate for a kid. You know, that never should have been my role. You know, and so I find now that I'm, you know, more centered as adult Kristie, I have trouble having fun. You know, I'm learning what brings me joy, because what used to bring me joy was getting wasted and going dancing and being a smart mouth ass, you know, like that was what was fun. And now I'm sort of just trying to figure out, like, okay, what do I do for fun? And then sometimes the shame comes in when I am having fun. I'm like, I don't know if I should be doing this. I should be like cleaning or doing some sort of adult activity, you know. And oh, it's such a, like, it's sticky. I say this often, but it's almost like pulling gum out of hair. It's like just this constant, like, oh my God, there's more. Oh, there's more, you know. And it just, and it's so many layers of that, because it was chronic traumatic situations. My entire life, you know, has been one long trauma. And you know, coming into this new chapter, where I'm actually, you know, my own mother, and have learned to really care for myself in those tender ways that I didn't know how to do that. I remember trying to learn how to be, I was like, how do I be a mother to myself? What does that even look like? There was no nurturing in my life. I was like, is this nice? Like, I was like, am I stroking my cheek? I didn't know how. It's like, I was so frustrated. I was cursing God. I was like, just kill me already. I don't know how to do this. But now that I feel like I've got a good enough hang on it, oh my God, it's so, like, I can breathe. You know, I have those parents inside of me, those, you know, I'm still working on the father bit. That's a bit more of a different one, but I'm able to take care of myself in those ways that I didn't get. And that's kind of what I want also to help people with, is becoming, you know, reparenting themselves, not hanging on to the hope that their parents will suddenly turn into those parents they wanted when they were a kid, you know, and also just helping people see what, I guess, symptoms are of developmental trauma, because I think a lot of people don't understand that the way they're acting in the present is because of what happened to them in the past. And it isn't as easy as just being like, oh, forget the past. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. It lives here. And you can love and light the shit out of it, but it's never going to go anywhere unless you actually deal with it, you know?
Yeah. I know it well. Send it love and light and all will be well. No. No. So I think there are phases of awakening. I think, you know, this is what I've learned, it's just the way I explain it. I think the first stage of spiritual awakening is a woke stage. It's almost where the light goes on, but you're still full of ego, or I was still full of egomania. And I got into this like savior complex where for 9 months, I could see what everybody else needed to do, but it was still based upon my egomaniacal sort of thinking, really, you know, and that would be woke, you know, so people would do things and I'd say, oh, you don't want to be doing it, you know, so I became sort of, you know, one of the Pharisees, basically, you know, and developed my own religion according to me, you know, and stuff like that. And I can see that that's the woke thing. But I think then I could talk the talk, because people used to say to me, well, you're not doing that yourself. And it'd be, hang on a second, right? God has chosen me for this. I don't need to do this. You just need to listen to what I say and do what I'm telling you. See, so I became like that, you know. And then there was a next phase was I started to see that I was, you know, not walking the walk, really. And I more or less do walk the walk these days. I mean, what you see is what you generally get, you know, unless the editor, I call this the editor, unless for some reason he jumps in, and I can almost like feel the filter coming in now, and I can breathe it away to say, I'm not interested in what you've got to say. I'm just going to keep going on this now. And my life is more or less beyond psychology now, you know. Because, Kristie, what I've learned is, and this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you like, 10 years before he died, he introduced 2 more stages, which made it 7, which is handy for me because I can introduce the 7 stages of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and also the chakras as well. But also, because basically I'm a neuroscientist that works with the autonomic nervous system, you know, and the 7 major endocrine glands, they link up with the 7 chakras, which also from a psychological point of view can link up with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So that's how I can explain it to people. And it depends who the audience is or who I'm giving talks to, but I can sort of try and bring them in now and weave them all together, because it makes sense to me, you know. And I bring in the caduceus, you know, the intertwined serpents of the medical symbol. I can sort of, I try and explain that now to the medics that I teach, right? How this is not only about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems working coherently with one another, but it's also working coherently with each of the organs as well. But also, if they all work together, then there's a psychological and emotional development that goes hand in hand with it as well. So that's where I'm up to with stuff, you know. And they go, we never thought of that. Well, I've only just thought of it myself, you know. So I'm only just trying to put the psychophysiology together and try and make some sense of it, really, you know. So that's where I'm up to. I think what I'm being sort of shown more than anything else is how, to me, these two yin and yangs of the heart, they're like the gates, really. And as we can allow those gates to open more and more, it's almost like the soul emerges then. And then, you know, it starts to embody and basically infiltrate all our cells, you know. And that's where I'm up to. The more we can let go and allow this sort of radiation to happen, the more we start to understand what it's all about. Sorry, I've gone on there. No. I thought you were falling asleep there for a moment. No. That's all part of my treatment.
Sleep hypnosis?
Yes.
Oh no, I could never fall asleep when you were talking. Yeah, that's really cool with the 7 height. I didn't know there was a 7th or a 6th and a 7th. That's really neat. What are they?
I think one's self-discovery before self-actualization. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've also linked it to all the S's. So the first one's security, meaning physical. And when you move up then to the gonads, it becomes sex. So there's security, sex, society, self-esteem, self-discovery, and then self-actualization. Then you see, you know, because I think, you know, that the 4 major instincts are the instincts for self-protection, sex, society, and self-esteem, right? And when those knock hell out of each other, there's always emotional disturbance. So what I've been shown is that any serious case of emotional disturbances, it's when one of those 4 major instincts are unconsciously or unaware to us knocking hell out of each other, you know. And what's actually happening now is, I think what's happening is, with the situation in the world, we're almost taking a backward step now, and most people are just living at the root. They're just interested now. And as a consequence, that a lot of intimacy is disappearing now, because people are afraid all the time, because they're more concerned with their personal survival. You know, there's a lot of social relationships and family relationships that are falling apart because people are being forced through fear into looking after themselves first and foremost, you know. And if people can know this, that these are instincts, and you can't send love and light or think your way out of these powerful instincts, because the information that's coming in is, I'm under threat, I'm under threat. And that's where opening the heart works. And letting go and trusting that there's a process much more powerful and much more loving that we could possibly realize. So when we hear the phrase, trust the process, it means there is a reason for all this. Let go now and be chauffeur driven and navigated, right? Depending on your individual soul's purpose, right? If you just pay attention to the sensitive cues that you're being given, all will be well. But if you keep looking out there for answers, all will not be well.
Yep. Every time, you know, looking back, every time I was about to make a breakthrough, I felt my shittiest. You know, I felt low and I felt like, what is going on? And then I would just like break through that wall, you know, and then but that keeps going. And yeah, exactly what you were just saying. What was I going to talk about with the security? Oh, it's gone. Like the river, it just flew through me.
So the first one, the root one, is associated with the adrenal glands, you see, because that's the most powerful. Yes. Yeah. So that's the epinephrine, adrenaline one. You know, then we move up to the sex hormones. And then the next one that's supposed to come in is oxytocin, which is about social relationships, you know. So they all sort of merge with one another, really. So it makes sense to me. I mean, this isn't in the medical literature at the moment, but I think it will be in the future. But to me, in the end, it all comes down to something that I call quantum disentanglement. You know, I think that the quantum understanding of physics now is a dimension thing, that it's about strings, isn't it, and intertwined and stuff like that. You call it unwrapping. And I think as we unwrap stuff, you know, there's all sorts of worms between each layer that we've got to try and clean up, you know, and then the next bit of brown paper comes off and there's maggots in there that need,
yeah.
So I feel if we can sort of know that we're being unwrapped, really. I've got the shroud of Turin in my head now, you know, for some reason. But yeah, I didn't know, you know, obviously I didn't know what we were going to talk about, but practically, Kristie, if you were going to say something to somebody, right, that was some sort of practical suggestion that they could do if they were feeling disturbed, what would it be?
Honestly, starting from the ground up, so nervous system, everything in relation to feeling safe in the body. I tried so many different things, but until I actually started like coming back down into this place of like a calm, you know, centered sort of place, I wasn't able to, you know, make those, you know, feel my intuition, open to my soul, make those decisions that were from like a love-based place. So like learning to breathe, learning to be in like a less stimulated, like fast-pacedness, you know, that hypervigilance of like constantly being busy. Like I'm still have like moments of that where because my brain is just so rapid fire. I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, a bit of both, but I operate very quickly and I constantly have to tell myself to slow down because I can do many things at once, but that is also part of like the traumatized brain. You know, it learned to be constantly aware and on guard, and ADD and all those things, ADHD. And like, that was like the brain being like, oh my God, there's a threat everywhere. You have to pay attention. So just coming back to that nervous system, the vagus nerve, like, you know, learning to breathe, those things like that is the baseline. Absolutely. And that can be quite treacherous because the body can be a scary place if you've never lived in it, right? Like it's terrifying, like all that stuff lived in here. So like this body, I was dissociated or I was hypervigilant. I was never here. I was always there. And, you know, coming back home is just, it's almost like humbling in a way because you're like, oh, this is it. You know, it's almost simple, but complex. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's sort of like, okay, so I'm in this now, you know, instead of being somewhere else or acting like someone else. I'm here now, I'm in this. So, you know, practical advice would be to like the nervous system, start there with like calming yourself, getting sort of ability to ground and center and come from a peaceful place. Because when you're frantic or, you know, operating out of it's not going to be as effective. It might take as long. That's ground up.
Yeah, I think I read sometime, I think it was Deepak Chopra, although I don't resonate with what he says, but he did say something that it made sense to me, that most people have been living out of body experiences. They need to get back into their body, you know, and I agree with that now, you know, and I learned a remedial massage. I teach remedial massage therapy, and myofascial trigger points is my sort of specialist area, because to me, it's all about the connective tissue. Really, and anything that we can do to stretch the connective tissue. So massage is helpful, but basically I try and teach people how to put their feet on the ground, you know, and imagine almost like they're in snowshoes, right? And that there's filaments going deep, anchoring them into the center of the earth, really, you know, and feeling that. Because I realized that, you know, any shock that would come to me, I'll be poof, straight in my head, you know, because that's what an out-of-body experience to me is. It's being like a head on a stick, you know, and just working from that like hypervigilance mode. I mean, I could be talking to you and listening to a conversation over there at the same time, just in case they were talking about me and it was a threat, you know. So I think it's probably about being able to become grounded and centered and use those former sensitivities as gifts now rather than curses, you know. So I mean, it's the old story, isn't it? It's the inversion to using those so-called defensive techniques more for helpful service to others and stuff, and as for service to others, I don't really go out to serve and help other people, right? I just go in midday, and I say to me inside self, if you like, I'll say, give us a shout if you need me, and if I get a sense of a move, I'm sure you get that as well, with all the stuff you've done, EFT and TFT and all the energy movements, I'm sure that you feel when you're being moved, and that's what I sort of do. I try and hang loose into it all the time and just allow it to move me, and as for raising our vibration, I don't think that we raise our vibration. I think we have to get out of the way for the vibration to raise us, so it's really about surrendering the ego self, and I don't know, I'm going to be honest, I don't know whether I'm in ego, right, or whether I'm not in ego most of the time. I don't know, but I do know that when I pick up a threat somewhere and I get a contraction, that's the ego. And it's almost like that feeling is a little indication to say, woo, hang on, Joe, stop a second, take a step back, see what that feeling is trying to tell you, and that's how I sort of live my life now, really, Can I talk about extraterrestrials before we go any further? Right.
Can I say one thing first?
Yeah, of course you can. Of course.
With the, I was reminded when you were talking about inverting. So before, when everything was a threat and I was able to, like what you were talking about is pick something out of someone, like see their darkest thing and use it. Now I've switched that to kind of being a gift, where now I'm able to I've been called the trauma sniffing hound, because I'm able to kind of pinpoint where, like, what original traumas are. Like if somebody's talking to me or expressing like a certain situation they're in, I'm able to sort of be like, okay, so it sounds like that's a relationship thing with your mother. She must have had this. And I'm usually right. I'm very good at pinpointing. And even in the quantum level, like I've been able to my gifts are coming online a lot more. I did a big energy training a few years back, but now I'm starting to be able to actually see the aura and see the energy, like where things are stuck. Almost like I remember reading Carolyn Miss' Anatomy of the Spirit back in 2018, and I'm like not on her level, but in a smaller way, I'm able to kind of see things now, and it's all just popping up. So now ETs, that's a good segue.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't have a clue. I was brought up as a devout Roman Catholic in a devout Roman Catholic family. So angels and archangels, I can handle that, and if they are ETs and stuff, that's fine. But over the last 30 years, I've looked at all sorts of different connections with things, like the Pleiadians and the Arcturians and Andromedans and stuff like that. And, whether they're different sort of sections and subsections of intelligences that bring in different streams of consciousness, I can handle that really. Where I'm up to now with the body is, I see that the Christ, to me, the heart is the representative of the Christ center. That's how I see that, the master center, right? And I've also got this connection now with the 12 cranial nerves as well, right? Because as we send information backwards, most of the cranial nerves operate facial muscles. And I don't know whether you've heard it. If you keep your face like that and the wind changes, you'll stick like that. That was an expression. But I really see now that if you cultivate this attitude of gratitude and you allow this inner smile to permeate all the cells, right, that feeling almost opens up new channels, right, of which I feel there are 12 of them, So to me, the heart is the master, but the 12 channels have been conflicting with one another and fighting all the time. They could be the disciples or the disciplines or the abilities or the skills that represent all the potentials of the human being. I really feel this. It's been with me for a long time. So in order to open those channels up, I think the more that we open our heart up and allow the light to come through, if you like, it's almost like a charismatic effect. It sort of unblocks those channels, and then new information starts to stream in. So if you want to call those portals to different intelligences, that's where I'm up to, So they're the disciples. I think the disciples then link, if you like, right, to the 12 tribes as well, But from a physical point of view, I think that we have the cranial nerves that link to the meridians then, And then that goes out then. So it's all 12, 12, 12. And in my mind, I see all the time like these dodecahedron shapes, like crystals linking with one another. So 12 disciples link with another 12 disciples, link to see. And the whole of the globe then is covered in, you know. Now I do have some idea what it means, but I do feel that there are groups meeting up in 12s and then connected. And I think that's happening across the globe, you know, and I think that's part of this transformation process or reconnection with the ancient wisdom that's coming through. So, you know, if people said to me, you know, did you reincarnate here? Do you have a soul mission? You know, if somebody asked me that in medicine, I'd say, oh, yes, I'm one of the general commanders on the Christos mission. Right, and I'm down here to lead the way and show people, right? Yeah, and all that. You know. But other than that, no idea really. But I think once I got sort of back in touch, if you like, with the energetics of it, because it's all energy to me now, right? Once I understood that I wasn't, you know, a human being of a spiritual experience, that I was a spirit coming through here for experience, it changed things completely. In fact, you know, there was that inversion took place. It almost like went whoop, and the next day I woke up in a completely different world with completely different feelings, you know. So go on then. What planet are you from on this way?
When I first woke up, I had these two mentors I was working with at the time. They read my Akashic records. They basically confirmed everything I already knew about myself, but they said I was part of the Blueprinter soul group, which was that you have like the original earth templates kind of instilled in your blueprint, and that you're here to share them. The messenger, there's 5 types of blueprinters, if you will, and my type was the messenger, as in like speaking out. But then I've also had other people sort of read into my stuff, and they were like Syrian, and so I don't really know. I resonate like a lot with Blueprinter. It feels like I'm kind of like you, just more like a, you know, spouting out information in like a more of like a teaching way. I call it the disco ball soul. That's just kind of how I feel. It's almost like this sparkling soul that like you see yourself in me because I'm reflecting light, right? Like it's just sort of, that's kind of how I see myself. Yeah, I mean, when you were saying 12, I'm pretty sure, like, I'm not sure you know about do you know the logoic levels and the monad and things like that? I think they have a different name. Okay. Well, your soul group, so you're like your soul, you're like plugged in, imagine like a circle, you're plugged in, and then there's a bunch of other souls and they're all in your soul group. But then that is plugged into another one, and there's 12 and there's 12, and it goes up. And so, yeah, so I've been like working at the quantum level when I do like energy clearings of myself. I'm clearing things for like monadic level, like it's like up there, connected to like all of these different branches of soul family members. Like I can feel them sometimes. Energy will come into me, and I'm like a very like grid sort of transmuter, grid worker type person. This energy will come through and I'm like, is this mine? Like suddenly I'm hit with this wave of fear. I don't think this is mine. And then I go into it and I'm able to be like, okay, that's the monad. Like there's some stuff up there. And I work with archangels every day. I know I'm like trauma and archangels, but I do. I work with them every day. I do clearings every day, and I'm able to get rid of that stuff, clear it for them, clear it collectively, clear it broadly. Because once you start, you know, clearing your own mirror enough, you start to then have, you know, at least for my template, I'm clearing like a little bit more, you know, a little bit broader mirrors, and helping because I'm able to move that energy through me. I'm able to, you know, do broader work. So that's my.
Well, I'd say same here. I've worked for over 25 years with the Kabbalah or the Kabbalah, you know, and since it moved from the 10 back to the 12, the original 12 spheres, right? Things have changed in me as well, because I work all the time with archangels, if you like, all those archangel energies. The archangel that I work mostly with is called Sandalphon, right?
Oh, Sandalphon.
Yeah, and Sandal. Oh, see, here we go. It's up now. It's here. See, now as soon as I get there, I get some big, massive wings behind me like that, and it's like a wise old owl, and the wings come round to bring me in. I feel comfortable, safe, protected, and then I start getting information that comes through. You know, now I couldn't really explain this in the medical teaching I do, because I'd be back on the way to the psychiatric department. You know, but I work with Sandalphon and Metatron as well, because Metatron's really the twin twin brother, you know, so there's that central channel that comes in. But also I get attracted to people who I can feel like you. I can see where they've got obstructions in their systems, you know, their energetic systems, because I do a lot of work from, you know, energetic synthesis and stuff like that. But it's almost like sometimes I can put my hand on people, or even you know, project that on their heart, and it's almost like a vacuum cleaner that opens their heart and draws up the obstruction, and then that's transformed then, and they feel cleared. Kristie, I don't try and work it out and stuff, you know. I just get a sort of impulses, do that, and as I've trusted that more and more, it seems to help people, you know, and you know, and I'm like you as well. I get a feeling. It's almost like stuff comes in and I'll say, is that mine or is it theirs? And generally speaking, it's theirs. And then I'll say, well, what do we need to do with it? And I'll say, like you, I'll say, look, I don't know why I'm getting this, but take it or leave it. But I'm getting this, you know. And I remember when I was being trained in this, because I've sat in trance circles and, you know, and mediumship circles for a long time and stuff like that. But I always, the teacher who taught me said, just give what you're given. Right, just give what you're given. Don't try and use your logic to turn it round. And I remember sort of saying to something, I don't know what this is. It sounds a bit daft, but I've just got this blue banana, right? Blue banana. She burst into tears, this girl, right? Because her father, who was in the world of spirit, right? Her father and her had this joke about a blue banana, right? Now, nobody could. And it's a bit like how I got introduced to all this mediumship stuff as well, is when I went through this recovery program, I got the awakening, if you like. I got this clear message came through, go to the local spiritualist church. And I thought, what's that? Didn't know what a spiritualist church was or anything. Right? But in the end, I got go and we're going to get you there. Anyway, I ended up there. And I'm sitting in the back thinking, what's all this about? You know, because they introduced the medium. I was expecting like a witch with a pointy hat and all this stuff, you know. And she said, I'd like to come to the new man at the back. Well, I was terrified, you know, right? And she said, son, she said, I know that you're new, but don't worry. You're being looked after. You chose this, right? You chose this. I thought, I don't know what they're talking about. She said, but I've got a little old lady here, an Irish lady. She's holding up a bottle of Guinness and she's saying, you've taken the right steps now, son, right? And then the confirming bit was, oh, she said, I can hear an Irishman coming behind now. And she said, is this your granddad? I said, yeah. He tells me that he lost his thumb digging the first Mersey tunnel. And he did, right? And that was the confirmation I got at the first meeting. Yeah. And oh, see, I've got it now as well. And I know that those energies, right, they guide me all the time, you know, and that's a big reassurance to me, you know. So I'm not trying to work it out anymore, you know, because the more I try and work it out and categorize it and name it and stuff, it takes away from the magic of it all, really. So I just work with the feelings.
Yeah, as soon as my ego gets in there and is like, I need to figure this out and put a label on it. I kind of imagine, if you like, anyone listening, you can take this. I imagine a limo, and I'm the driver and my ego's in the back, like a movie star, just being like, mah, 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 mah. And I just press the button that goes, the divider goes up and I'm just like, you chill in the back and take a time out. And I'm just going to keep driving. So put your ego in the limousine.
And that's like what I was saying before, is sometimes my higher self, the I am self, is in the back. I have to press the button to open it up, you know. So it's a sort of a paradoxical thing. So that's where I'm up to. Do you want people to get in touch? I don't know, Kristie, I don't know what you do, what services you offer or anything like that. Do you want people to get in touch?
Yeah, you know, it's funny timing for all this to be happening, because in September was when I was like kind of feeling like I was going to start, you know, offering to work with people one-on-one. So it hasn't happened yet, but I mean, I've slowly, like, I have one or two people that I do work with now, but it's less in like a, you know, professional setting. It's more here and there, but I am going to be, so I'm absolutely happy to receive messages if someone is interested, but otherwise just like follow me or add me as a friend, and like you'll see the announcement when it happens, you know. So
Yeah,
I'm in coming.
Yeah, I'm in the. I can feel this a similar thing, but I think my job feels like is to take this information and simplify it in a sort of, you know, a simple way, just to try and, because I seem to be able to talk in ordinary language about these things and break them down and stuff like that. But I think more than anything else is I do feel over the next few months there's going to be a compression now, and things are going to speed up much more quickly. And those people who are just sort of teetering on the edge of, if you want to call it waking up, right, they'll be confused as hell. So I sort of see it as, don't worry, it's part of this process. And maybe just, you know, that's, now I could be wrong, you know, but that's what I feel the job is, really, more than anything else. You know, and if people want to contact me, don't. I'm too busy, right? You know, when I get like messages, think, oh God, I've got no time for this, you know. And you know, I'm being honest, you know, and I have to sort of sometimes say, you know, I'm sorry, I can't, you know, because I've even stopped. I used to write a big long story explaining why, and now it's more or less, no, I can't, so yes, I can, you know, that type of thing. You know.
Oh, well, I said they could reach out, but I didn't say I would reply.
That's fine. Because my head says, you know, they'll understand that I'm like really busy, you know. So that's where I'm up to. I'm still learning. I only ever feel like I'm just scratching the surface. Yeah. I do feel that our personalities are basically being washed away, right? And we'll be left in a sort of no man's land for a while, but don't worry, that's part of the cleansing process. And then the emergence of the true self will come through and will guide you to being free. Basically, I think it's all about freedom. It's all about sovereignty. It's all about all those sorts of things, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there we are, old chap. It's that time's just gone, and it's gone in a flash. We'll do it again, hopefully, if you want to. Absolutely. At some point when the time is right. Yes. But it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It really has.
And let's just feel if there's anything else wanting to come through. Do you do light language? Have you got any of that going on or anything?
I don't really do. It kind of doesn't come through for me in language ways. More just like I just kind of move. You know, I do like intuitive movements. That's kind of my light language.
Well, I've been told that I'll be doing 12 different voices, or I'll be allowing 12 to come through, because I do quite a lot of that. I've done for a long time. But the one that comes through, and I have to practice this when I'm swimming, is that deep, like draconian dragon one that comes through. Now, when that comes through, that used to frighten the hell out of me, that one, because it's a big black dragon with red eyes, right? And it's almost like got claws that are red and blood tipped as well. But it used to frighten the hell out of me, but it's protection, really. And when that comes through, it scares the shit out of a lot of people, but it's a cleansing energy at depth. It's a root one, that one, you know. And I've been sort of trained almost as if my root and my throat are open and connected. And that's when the true primal power comes through. So I'm sort of being trained in allowing this primal energy to come through for positive purpose now, and not for destructive purposes, you know, because I feel that that's what's going on. And they've shown me how to practice that. Is when I'm swimming, I do a lot of swimming, is to go underwater and really open up here and go and really open it up, you know. And sometimes when I'm doing it, I get a sense of that I'm almost like a reptile alligator swimming, you know what I mean? So I've got see, I've got it with me now, right? So, you know, I go with it now because I know that energy now is being guided and guarded and what's the word I'm looking for? Moderated, if you like, by a higher power for good purpose, you know. Because in the past, in drink, it used to come out in destructive ways, you know. So I've touched all that stuff. Anyway, yeah. Enough's enough, Joseph. Kristie, thank you, my love. It's been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. Thanks very much. Yeah, and me too. And keep in touch, and hopefully we'll do one of these again shortly.
Absolutely. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.
Lots of love.
Bye bye.